Hello, I'm Katie von Holzen, IASCL's Media Coordinator. I have with me today Celia Rosemberg, Principal and Researcher at the Research Council of Argentina, the CONICET. And this is funded by the National Research Council of Argentina, and she's also a professor at the University of Buenos Aires. She received her bachelor and PhD degrees from the University of Buenos Aires, and throughout her career, she has developed a line of work that combines language acquisition research and educational intervention with the aim of ensuring inclusive and high-quality education for Argentinian children. As the Director of Research at CIPME, which is the Interdisciplinary Center for Investigations of Psychology, Mathematics, and Experiments, which is an institute under the Research Council of Argentina. She leads an interdisciplinary research group called IASCL, which is looking at social interaction, language, and cognition in infancy and childhood. This studies linguistic environments and language development in children living in monolingual urban marginalized populations and bilingual indigenous communities in Argentina. Their project involves extensive fieldwork, including audio and video recorded longitudinal observations of children's daily lives. This extensive naturalistic corpus serves as the basis of studies addressing questions of psycholinguistic theories on language acquisition and the development of ecologically valid language assessment tools contributing to diversity in science. As a group, they've also dedicated a significant part of their time to designing and implementing educational interventions and materials aimed at expanding children's opportunities for vocabulary and discourse development, as well as early literacy learning. Celia, it's a pleasure to have you joining me today. I thought maybe we could start at the beginning. So how did you become interested in the study of language acquisition?
Well, first, Katy, thank you very much for this opportunity to share my work in Argentina. I began doing research when I was 20 years old, while I was studying education at the University of Buenos Aires. Just after the return of democracy following the military dictatorship in Argentina, there was a broad call at the University of Buenos Aires for students to join research projects. The democratic government, we have by that moment made a great effort to rebuild the scientific system in my country, and I was really very lucky to be part of that movement as a young student. I joined a team of language researchers that were focused on the study of early literacy. I was initially interested in literacy because not being able to read and write fluently, and more generally, language use underpins social inequality. But very soon, the study of literacy led me to become interested in the study of oral language because the vocabulary and the discursive abilities that children develop in oral communication are the foundation for literacy. Additionally, due to my background in education, I have always been interested in understanding the situated nature of language development, particularly in how this process occurs in daycares and preschools, but also in community and family contexts, because when you pay attention to these situated language processes, you can perceive the role that the sociocultural context and oral interactions may have as the matrix of language learning. So this hands-on awareness sparked my interest in learning more about these processes and the reasons why I seek to generate data in these diverse environments, which might contribute to understanding language development.
That's really interesting. I really like to hear about how kind of you moved from, or you take your applied experience and you're turning it into research that can actually make a difference in your community.
So, maybe perhaps I can talk about a bit how we do field work or the challenges we face.
Absolutely. You do a lot of field work in your research, and I'm very curious about this as well. Yeah.
Well, the first and one of the most important challenges in fieldwork is gaining access and obtaining consent from the communities and the families. And so we get access to indigenous communities and populations in disadvantaged socioeconomic circumstances from a community referent, someone who is a member from the community, or someone who has built a previous strong relationship with the community, for example, the director or a teacher, or working at a daycare, or a social worker, or a volunteer from an NGO running a community kitchen. And so the participants sign the consent form after we inform them of our scientific objectives, but also our educational objectives. So they give us permission to access their daily life because they trust us that the data we collect will not only benefit science, but they will also imply some kind of more tangible improvement to their living conditions, such as educational programs or materials for their children. And also we try to get the community involved in the research process. We train community members or social activists working in these communities to participate in different actions of the research process. They collaborate in the development of instruments, selecting and validating the stimuli. They participate in data collection and work on the transcription and translation of audio and video recordings of naturalistic situations. So,
very interesting. And it sounds like you have to work with a lot of different stakeholders at the same time. So not only is that a lot of work, but I'm sure that it also yields really interesting results. So could you perhaps share some of your recent findings that you've had in your field work?
Yeah, in fact, our research on Argentinian monolingual Spanish-speaking children from different socioeconomic backgrounds in general replicate SES differences that were previously observed in North American population, while middle SES children are exposed to more child-directed speech, low SES children hear more overheard speech, that is a speech that it is not directly addressed to them. And this is likely because low SES children often live in highly dense households, whereas a variety of activities which are not mostly centered in the child occurred in the same space, in the same room. And so typically conversations between different participants overlap, and this leads to a higher proportion of overheard speech compared to child-directed speech. So in line with previous research also in adult populations, our findings indicate that this child-directed speech is also more lexically diverse in middle SES households and more syntactically complex. But unlike previous research, we transcribe overheard speech. so we can provide new evidence about the qualitative characteristics of this overheard speech. So we found that middle-aged children, in fact, are exposed to more higher complex speech, more syntactically complex speech in child-directed speech and also in overheard speech. But overheard speech is not less lexically diverse in low SES households than in middle-aged households. And it is important to know, to try to understand this, then even if the principal caregiver's speech is not lexically diverse in these low SES families, overheard speech from multiple interlocutors can increase children's exposure to new vocabulary. And so multiple interlocutors would benefit children in these low SES households. So we also, our recent findings also find that a longitudinal increase in the quantitative and qualitative characteristics of child-directed speech, and a decrease in the amount of overheard speech across children's second year of life. And to analyze the impact, see longitudinally, the influence of SES and input child-directed speech and overheard speech on children's vocabulary development, we adapted the Computerized Comprehension Test, that is a vocabulary comprehension test developed by Dr. Margaret Friend from San Diego University. And using that test, our findings show that middle SES children perform better on the test than low SES children, and that while child-directed speech supports language development, language comprehension for low SES and for middle SES children, and we found also an interaction between overheard speech and SES that shows that overheard speech may serve as a source from which low SES but not middle SES toddlers can learn vocabulary. And this, in fact, is really a very interesting finding from our research, and also in collaboration with Margaret Friend, we have created a Qom-Spanish bilingual adaptation of the Computerized Comprehension Test to assess vocabulary learning in bilingual 3 to 7-year-old children in Qom rural communities in the Chaco region. This is very far from Buenos Aires, and in the very north of Argentina. And these children are brought up bilingual, with 60% of their early input in Qom and 40% in Spanish. But however, our findings provide evidence that there is a Qom language attrition as children approach elementary school. Up until age 5, Qom is on par with Spanish, which is the majority language in both vocabulary size and speed of processing, but it begins to decline from age 5 to 7. This is something that needs to be taken into account by educational policies, and so we are working a lot on that. in collaboration with different kind of organizations, international organizations such as, for example, UNICEF and the Ibero-American Organization of Ibero-American State, and also with local private foundations in Argentina that support our work. And so we are working with the educational department of different Argentinian provinces in the north of Argentina. And so we are trying to make changes in this situation.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I can sense an influence of your experience influencing this investigation, which included overheard speech, right? Thinking about the environment that the child is being raised in and how that, in a specific context, in a specific, I guess in this case, socioeconomic status group of children, how that can explain differences beyond just the education or income level of the parents. I think that that's great work. And so you were just, you were talking about your work in the Chaco region, and you mentioned that it was very far away from Buenos Aires. So I'm curious then about your recruitment process. So how do you form and maintain these really essential and important relationships with the populations that you study?
Well, I have been working with some populations, for example, the Qom community in Pampa de Lidio in Chaco for more than 15 years. And also I have been working with a migrant community of Qom, also the Daviagayqui community, which is too far outwards from Buenos Aires for more or less the same time, and also with many daycares in the metropolitan area of Buenos Aires who receive population from low SES populations, very, very slums, urban marginalized populations that are known here in Argentina, frequently called like villas de emergencia. And for many years, 15 years, that's a lot of times. The fact is that in the daycares where we collect data, we always offer at the same time training to teachers on child language development. In the community kitchens where we recruit families, we implement family literacy and child-to-child literacy tutoring programs. We have used the data collected in our research, mainly the transcriptions of audios and video recordings, the same data with that we use to analyze the linguistic environment. We use that as the basis for developing, together with the indigenous and Creole teachers, what we call ethnographic storybooks. That is, books that are focused on the children from the community children's life. And so in that way, we recover the cultural and the linguistic backgrounds of the family. We have also developed an educational application, WONA Cuentos, with what WONA is a word in Qom that means we have books, and to promote children language development and early literacy in Spanish monolingual or Qom-Spanish bilingual communities. And so in this way, rather than only collecting data from the communities, we ensure that they receive some tangible benefits. And these more tangible benefits are more important to the communities than the long-term benefits that the scientific research could entail for the whole society, but which would hardly lead to an improvement in the living conditions. So So we try to give them something that is important, really important for them, that we try to reach, that the results can mean something different for them, for their life.
Yeah, that's really great. So not only you better understanding their language development, but also giving them something, it sounds like something that could be very treasurable, a really, really beautiful item to receive. I think that that's really nice. So you mentioned this in your answer there, that you and your group also conduct intervention studies. So could you tell me maybe a little bit about these studies and maybe some of the outcomes that you've seen as a result?
Interventions projects we carry out, we integrate different lines of actions. We include daycare and preschool teacher training on language development, family literacy and child-to-child literacy tutoring programs, and the development and implementation of culturally responsive monolingual or bilingual educational materials in school, households, and community settings. We work in daycares, in schools, but also in the communities. So we video record the interaction situations. We have examined the strategies that all the children use to teach younger children unfamiliar words in storytelling situations, and we have analyzed at-home linguistic input, comparing the everyday naturalistic situations in which children participate with those that are focused on literacy materials we provide as part of our family literacy workshops. And so, as I mentioned previously, I think currently these interventions are being scaled through agreements between CONICET, the educational departments of several Argentinian provinces, private foundations, and international organizations such as UNICEF and the Organization of Ibero-American States, and also to estimate the influence of our actions on children's development. We have begun using our adaptation of the Computerized Comprehension Test to assess vocabulary comprehension. And we have also developed tools to assess early literacy, such as phonological awareness and knowledge of the writing system. And similarly to the vocabulary tool, these tests automatically provide measures of accuracy and latency. And currently, we are testing large samples of Spanish monolingual children with these tests. Really a great number of children, very big samples, because we are working in collaboration with the government, the educational departments of several provinces.
Okay, excellent. Celia, I'm going to switch gears here now a little bit and talk to you about some IASCL things. So you attended the 2024 IASCL Congress in Prague. That's actually where I had the pleasure to meet you in person and attend at least one of your symposia. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you and your group presented in Prague.
Yeah, well, my group and I presented studies at 3 symposia in input studies across languages and communities in South America, that was coordinated by Lourdes de Leon. We presented our study on SES and longitudinal variations in at-home child-directed speech and overheard speech, and their effects on children's vocabulary. Also, we presented in our 2 studies in the symposium organized by Dr. Margaret Friend, that was a direct approach to global vocabulary assessment. And there we shared our documentation study of vocabulary acquisition in bilingual Qom-Spanish children from rural communities. And also we presented a second study in which we examined vocabulary comprehension in monolingual Spanish-speaking children who differ in their socioeconomic but also sociocultural background, because one of the groups was indigenous, were composed by indigenous migrants. Also in the development of discursive abilities, argumentative, explanatory, and narrative skills symposium that was coordinated by Maya Migdalek, who is an Argentinian researcher from my group. We presented 2 studies analyzing children's discursive skill in the socioeconomically diverse populations we work with. Also, as one of my students was unable to travel, I presented her poster with part of her PhD dissertation, and her presentation reported an analysis of the relationship between action requests addressed to children in their second year of life and syntactic complexity at 6 years old, a longitudinal analysis also, in which she used the corpus of naturalistic situations we have created in Argentina.
Wow, it sounds like you were very busy in Prague. But I hope you had a good time. So not only did we meet in Prague, but the two of us actually had a little bit of interaction through IASCL before the Congress. And that was through your work as a member of the Travel Award Committee. That's along with Dr. Sierra O'Toole, Dr. Meredith Rowe, and the chair of the committee, former president, but president at the time, Dr. Annick de Houwer. So I can't claim to have helped too much. The committee did really quite a lot of work, but my role was helping you put together some of the forms to collect answers from the applicants and getting the answers to you to review. So I was hoping perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what the Travel Award Committee does, as well as a little bit about the selection process for the Travel Awards for IASCL 2024.
Yeah, well, the committee goal was, as you mentioned, to facilitate researchers and students from around the world to attend the conference. And as a member of the IASCL Executive Committee based in Argentina, I was really happy to serve this purpose. We worked closely with Meredith Rowe and with Ciara O'Toole from Ireland, and I felt that we complemented very well in this stack. And also Annick de Houwer provided us with guidance and support throughout all the tasks, the process. It was a lot of work, but I am really happy with this experience, and I'm really grateful to the IASCL board for inviting me to be part of it. We had to go through a selection process because although IASCL allocated significant funds, there were enough to cover everyone. There wasn't a pre-established selection criterion apart from the requirement that applicants should be scholars working in the Global South. They could be seniors also, or students anywhere. So what we first do, it was provide feedback to the final version of the web-based application form you were creating, because we have to ensure that it requested all the information we would need in the selection process. Then we discussed and agreed on a set of common criteria to select applicants. And so we finally agreed to consider how the applicants could be in the conference. And so we prioritized those who had more than one accepted roles. We also consider where they have provided a strong justification for requesting funds, and if their presentation focused on topics related to diversity, like underrepresented population, underrepresented languages, or also bilingualism. We also gave priority to applicants from minority groups that are really very underrepresented in academia, in research. So then after ranking the applicants, that was really a very strong, hard work. We had to decide how successful applicants would receive the funds. And we had to take into consideration and discuss a lot of specific situations and ensure, for example, that the funds were made available before the meeting to those grantees that couldn't cover the cost of the trip in advance. So
a lot of important work that also needed to happen fast. So I remember talking with Anik about this, that it was important to make sure that applicants were informed that they would be receiving the funds quickly enough that they could apply, for example, for visas to travel, which is also something that I think needs to be taken into account when thinking about working with researchers globally. Do you actually give them enough time in advance to be able to make all of the preparations to attend your event? And I think that you guys did this really well. And I applaud you for your hard work. It was a lot of work. I was impressed with how efficiently and how quickly you guys were able to complete this. So as you mentioned, many of the recipients, this was one of the requirements, many of the recipients of the travel awards to attend IASCL 2024 in Prague and in the Czech Republic were from the Global South. And so as a professor and researcher in Argentina, which is also in the Global South, so you're working and from Argentina, which is in the Global South. So from this perspective, what does it mean for researchers to receive financial support to attend conferences, international conferences like IASCL 2024?
Yeah, well, most researchers in the Global South cannot afford the expenses involved in attending a conference because travel, accommodation, subsistence, and even registration fees are very expensive for students and also for researchers working in the South. So it is very difficult to afford these costs without financial support. And also participating in this conference provides us with the opportunity to learn about cutting-edge research methodologies and ideas generated by researchers worldwide. It gives us the chance to share and discuss which questions are relevant and what methodological approaches can be used to study language development in this diverse context. It also provides an opportunity to establish relationships with other teams to contribute to cross-cultural and cross-linguistic research. So it's a very important opportunity for us. Myself have learned a lot in conference, so I always try that my group and my students be able to travel.
Fantastic. And I'm hoping that it's maybe a little bit easier to travel to IASCL 2027, which will be taking place in Brazil. So I don't need, is there even a time zone change for you to travel to Sao Paulo?
Sorry? Sorry?
Is there even a time zone change? Is it the same time zone?
No, I think we have 1 hour of difference, more or less.
Beautiful. Okay.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be too bad. I really look forward to being able to attend. So building upon that, your experience working in Argentina, you've been doing this now for many years as a child language researcher. So I'm curious, how has the face of child language research in Argentina changed over that time?
Yeah, well, at the end of the 80s, when I started doing research as a student, when I was 20, research on child language was scarce and largely focused on Chomskyan theories. There were also some groups working on early literacy, but over the years, the scattered researchers began to form groups, and currently there are groups studying different topics on language, on child language, such as language disorders and child language in indigenous communities and urban marginalized populations. We use methodologies that consider the role of context in language development. And while researchers are more connected internationally, and methodologies developed in other contexts are being adapted for the populations with whom we work. Even so, child language research in Argentina is still very limited. Aside from my group, I can only think or identify 5 or 6 other groups with varying levels of scientific production. So it's still very limited. We have to do a great effort. And yeah.
Yeah, I think before you were mentioning though that you're in a environment in your research center where there are a lot of different researchers. So I'm hoping that that also helps kind of broaden opportunities for collaboration.
Yeah. We have a group in my research center. There are 2 groups working in language disorders, and also there are people working with literacy, but quite more older children. Yeah.
Interesting. So I have a final question to you. This is, I asked this question in some form in every one of my interviews. So the IASCL has, at their Congress this year, given a new award, the IASCL Early Career Award, the purpose of which was to honor more junior exceptional child language scholars. And so it was conferred for the first time in Prague to Rowena Garcia, a researcher here in Germany, but doing work in the Philippines. And so I ask you, as a more senior researcher, what advice you might have for early career members of IASCL?
Well, it is rather difficult to give advice to early career researchers from different parts of the world, at least for me, because the conditions for producing knowledge, priorities, and also which questions may be relevant can vary a lot depending on the context. However, I think there is something we all share, which is curiosity and the pleasure we find in asking questions and trying to understand child language. So I would simply say this, beyond the stress that an academic career can bring, collaboration can make the journey easier, and always enjoy the process. So
I think that that's great advice. Be curious and collaborate.
yes, and enjoy.
And enjoy. I think that being curious and collaborating always brings me joy. So, well, Celia, thank you so much for joining me today. It was Really a pleasure to get to know you a little bit more, also to get to know more about your research. And I look forward to interacting with you in the future and seeing more coming from your lab.
Well, thank you very much, Katia, and it was a pleasure.